Hello everyone and welcome back to HFE Outdoors, and thank you for tuning in to episode 3. Now in today's episode we were supposed to go herping, which is amphibian hunting, and find lizards, frogs, toads, just about every amphibian out there. But when I got back home and I put all the video in, it really didn't feel like an episode to me. Even though we did find a ton of lizards, American toads, spotted salamanders, spring peepers, I just didn't think it was episode worthy. So instead, at the last second, I decided to change it to the upcoming trout season here in Pennsylvania, and I'll talk about what I use and how I prepare for the upcoming and opening day. Hi guys and welcome back. As you guys already know, I'm going to be talking to you today about the upcoming trout season here in Pennsylvania, and I'm going to be talking to you about what I use and how I prepare for the opening day. As you guys can see, we're in the studio today, and I'm going to be showing you everything that I use during the trout season. So to start off things, I'm going to talk to you about what kind of rod I like to use. Now right here, I have a 5'6" ultralight rod. Now ultralight means the sensitivity. Now rods usually have multiple sensitivity levels ranging from the most sensitive as ultralight to the most sensitive as extra heavy. Now what makes an ultralight an ultralight? Well, as you guys can see here, even with the smallest of movement, my rod tip is starting to go up and down like crazy. And this allows me to feel even the most sensitive of bites or the area underneath the water. So like if I hit a small little rock, I could be able to feel that in my rod, or even the smallest of fish bite, I could feel that. So that's why I like to use an ultralight. I recommend anywhere between an ultralight to a medium for trout fishing. A medium is kind of heavy pushing it, but it still would work great. I wouldn't go anything above a medium, but that's what I like to use is a 5'6" ultralight rod. Now moving on to the rod, I like to use 6-pound test. Now 6-pound test is a great middle, sweet spot, as you would say, for trout fishing. I recommend anywhere between 4 pounds to 8-pound test. Now, pound test is referring to the breaking point at which the line can handle. So a 4-pound test can usually handle about 4 pounds until it snaps, and 8 pounds, same thing. So I like to go in between there. So I go 6 pounds, so that way even if the small fish comes by and bites it, it won't break the line, and even if a little bit bigger fish comes by, it won't break it. So I like to use 6-pound test because I feel as if that's the sweet spot. Now when it comes to line color, I like to use either a clear, a light blue, or a low visibility green. And today I have a low visibility green here. And the reason I like to use those colors is because when the line's in the water, you really don't want the fish to see that line. If they see it, they could be spooked by it or just not take your bait. So with a low visibility green, when it goes in the water, it almost becomes invisible to the fish and they only see your lure. So let's put that on the line the reel right now, and then let's move on forward. So before putting on the new line, I want to take off the old line that's been on there for a couple of years, and then we can put on the new line. So once I have all the old line removed, I'm now going to cut it off. And I'm going to start to put on the new line. Now the new line usually comes with a little sticky note on the side, which is right here. I'm just going to put that off to the side for right now. And how I attach the new line is first I'm going to open up the bail. I'm going to insert the line through the closest eye ring. I'm going to go wrap around the head of the bail here. And I'm going to tie a square knot. So once I have the square knot done, I'm going to take that note that we have right here, and I'm going to put it right on top of that knot we just created, just for some extra security when holding it down. And I'm going to cut off the excess. So now that the line is on, I'm going to hold tension up here with the line, and I'm going to start to reel it in. Now you want to keep tension on that line when reeling it in, because if you have it too loose, when you go to cast, they'll all come off at the same time. So make sure you keep a nice amount of tension on when reeling the new line in. So once my bail is full up with line, I usually like to keep it about a millimeter away from the edge here, just so that way it doesn't go over, and then when you're casting stuff and reeling it back in, that it doesn't go over or under, it just stays on the rod perfectly. So once I have that all set up nicely, I'm going to cut it off and feed it through the rest of the eye-rings. So once my rod and reel are complete with the new fishing line on it, I'm just going to put it to the side for right now. And now we're going to move on to what kind of bait and lures do I use during the trout season. So for the past couple of years, I've been using spinners as my go-to whenever trout fishing. I've been using rooster tail spinners with the brown trout design with the golden plate on it for many years, and it's never let me down. This is actually, as I say, my secret weapon when going trout fishing, because no matter what, you're going to get a bite on it. I usually use the 16th ounce size. I feel as if that's perfect. It's not too big, not too small. It's just an all-around go-to size, and it's perfect for trout in my opinion. And whenever I go to the store, I always make sure to grab 2 of them. Always grab 2, because you never want to be on your first day, your second cast, and you get snagged on a tree or a rock or something under the water that you can't see, and then lose it, and then you're done for the day. So my opinion is to always go to the store, and whenever you buy your favorite bait, grab 2 of them, because you never want to be in a situation where you just get there and then you lose it on your first or second shot. So whenever I go, I grab 2 of them. Now, from what people have been telling me, they said this is a miracle worker. It's the best lure you can get out there, and it's called a Phoebe lure. It's basically like a little fish bent at an angle, and then you reel it in through the water, and it acts like a minnow. Which is basically what the spinners do, but this one's just a little bit more, it has some patterns on it. It doesn't have the colors like the rooster tails, but I've been told good things about this, so this year I'm going to give it a shot. I'm putting that in my tackle box, and I'll give it a couple casts this year, and hopefully we'll catch some fish on it. Now those are the artificial baits that I use throughout the trout season. I usually don't use live bait, but in hard times when fish aren't really biting, I'll throw on a live bait. So when I use live bait, I usually use eagle claw hooks. I use sizes 10 and 8. Now the size matters when fishing for trout or any fish in general. The smaller the number, the bigger the hook, and the bigger the number, the smaller the hook. So when I'm fishing, I usually start off with a size 10 hook, which is a little bit smaller than a size 8. And when I start casting this out, I usually use wax worms, red worms, or minnows, or a piece of corn like my dad used to teach me. But whenever I use it, I think anywhere between a size 12 and a size 6 is good enough for trout. So when I start off with a size 10, and I'll cast it out, and if I keep missing fish, I'll move up to a size 8. I don't move to a size 6. I feel as if that's too big, but I know some people that use size 6 religiously. So my go-to is a size 10, and if the fish start biting and they start missing, then I'm going to move up to a size 8. Now for some of the people that aren't really experienced, or I mean I use this as well, I'll go throw on a bobber at times. Now I use this when I'm trying to see more indication signs, like when I'm fishing a pond or a lake, and I'm just trying to get that bait at a certain level. I don't usually, when I'm fishing creeks and stuff, I want that down low to the low to the ground, and just feeling for bites, because the bait is constantly moving through a creek. But a pond where it's sitting still, I'll usually throw in a bobber, and I'll usually tie my live bait about 2 feet below the bobber, and that way when it sinks down, I know it's at a certain level where the fish are usually cruising at, and it helps me indicate when I have a fish on, thus why you use a bobber. And I mean, it's a go-to source for when fishing lakes and ponds. But most of the time I usually don't use one, but it's always nice to have one in your tackle box because you never know what situation you're going to be fishing in next. Now here in Pennsylvania, you have to have your fish on a stringer at all times. When I was younger, I used to use a string stringer. And what a stringer is basically that when you have a fish, you hook this on this part. And when you have a fish, you usually hook the main part onto like a rock or a stick so to prevent it from going, and then you throw the other end into the water. Now each of these hooks you put through the lip or gills of a fish, and then you clamp it on there so that way that fish isn't going anywhere. Now in PA, the limit I believe is 5 fish, or 5 trout per day. And when I was younger, I used to use a string stringer, which is the same thing as this, but there's no hooks on it. You just put the fish through the stringer, and then it will tie down at the end. Basically, the first fish that you put on there is your anchor point, and every fish you put on there will be held by that first fish. Now, I'm not even going to say usually, I like using the metal stringer the best because I can put on a fish on this one and I know it's hooked in, and if I get more fish, I can keep putting them on the hooks. And what I like about this design is that if you catch a bigger fish, you can take off your smallest fish and release it back into the water, and it will be with no harm, and then you can put that bigger fish on there. The only downside with the string stringer is that when you have those fish on there, you can't take off the smallest fish by itself and then put on the bigger fish. You have to take off every single fish before that smallest fish and then put the big fish on, then put the other fish back on. And it's really frustrating when you're out there and you're just trying to fish really quickly or just enjoying yourself to have more fish on the line, then you have to take one off and then you take all the other ones off and then put that one on. It's just a hassle. So I like using the metal one the best. Plus, it also keeps your fish alive a lot longer than a string one because it has more room to move around. So my go-to when fishing is to use a metal stringer, and it's just more practical and easier to use than a string stringer. So now after talking about what I use for trout season, I'm going to talk to you guys about what I think is essential to bring when trout fishing or just fishing in general. And the first thing I always carry on me is a thing of bug spray. And I always try to make sure that the bug spray is at least 40% DEET. Especially when going around water sources, there's a lot of insects down there, especially biting insects. And I can use a normal thing of bug spray and it won't do the job. And the higher the DEET you have, the better chances of repelling the bugs it does. So whenever I go, I always like to make sure I have a thing of bug spray on me that's at least 40% DEET, and that I won't get bit and I won't be distracted when fishing. Now another thing that I think is essential to bring is a pair of polarized sunglasses. Now polarized means that it takes away that reflective ability from water or any surface and allows you to see past it. So when fishing in the water, polarized glasses make a huge difference. When the sun glare on top of the water, it's very hard to see down and see the rocks and structure underneath the water. So whenever I go fishing, I bring a pair of polarized sunglasses so I could see down and see what I'm fishing at. You don't want to be fishing in a spot where there's a giant rock there and you're not going to catch anything. So wearing polarized glasses allows you to see that rock and you can move around. It's basically like spot fishing, and you could see the water through the water better and be able to see what you're after. Another thing I like to bring is a hat. Now, hat helps the polarized sunglasses work tremendously. It takes off that sun glare from the top of your head, and it makes sure that you could see strictly into the water and see down beneath. So whenever I go fishing, I always bring a pair of polarized sunglasses, a hat, and bug spray. Out of all those, the hat and the bug spray are the most important. It is nice to have a pair of polarized sunglasses. It's not necessary, but I feel as if it's an essential. So what I usually do is go out to your local store and buy a pair of polarized sunglasses. Sunglasses do help, but polarized allow you to see into the water, like I said earlier, and it allows you to increase your fishing and visibility way better. So now I'm going to show you guys how I tie on my hooks and lures. I've been using this knot for many years, and it's been so reliable for me. I've never lost a fish because of it. And so this is just how I tie on my hooks and lures. So I'm going to grab the spinner, and I'm going to grab my line, and I'm going to insert the line into the head of the lure here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it through about 3-4 inches here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the top of it right here, pinch it, and I'm going to take that excess line, hold down, make sure you have a little bit of a gap there. I don't know if you could see that. A little bit of a hole, and I'm going to start tying below it, just wrapping it around those main lines there. So I'm going to do it about 5 times here. And I'm going to take it, once I'm done, push it back through the hole that you created at the top. Hold that excess line. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to cinch it tight. And you're going to grab your main line that's connected to, and you're just going to pull it down. And then you're going to pull tight. Make sure it's on there pretty good. And then you're going to cut the excess line. You want to get it as close to the knot as possible, but you want to leave just a little bit, about a millimeter, so that way if a bigger fish does get on there and pulls it tighter, it doesn't come loose. So I'm just going to cut it closely, about a millimeter. And as you guys can see, the lure is pretty secure on there. It's not going anywhere. And that's how I tie my lures and hooks on. So now that my lure is attached to my line, I'm going to hook it onto the rod. Now, I have on my rod here a little spot where you can hook on your baits and lures, but some rods don't have that. So you can either hook it onto the handle where you're fishing from, or you can hook it onto the first eye-ring up here, and that'll hold it just as good. So I'm just going to hook it on to my little spot here. And now you're going to notice there's some slack in it. It's going to hang down. So what I usually like to do is I like to turn it tight enough, but I don't want that rod tip to bend with the rod when I reel it in. You want to keep it straight, because if you bend it and you hit something hard, it could snap your rod. So I like to keep it just tight enough that the lure doesn't dangle everywhere and that the rod tip is nice and straight. And that will ensure that the rod is safe and everything is good to go. So now I went over everything that I use for the opening day of trout season, what I use and how I prepare for it. And I hope you guys use this for your adventures as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 3, and I hope to see you guys in episode 4. Thanks for watching.